We're streaming.
Yep, we are good to go. We're now live.
All right. Thank you, Beth.
Tell me when you need me to go, Ricky.
We'll give it about another few seconds when it hits 2, and that way people may be dialing in just at 2 o'clock, I would suspect.
Okay.
It's 2 o'clock now, Chair.
Okay. Okay, the meeting will now come to order. Welcome to the March 22nd, 2021 City of Asheville Board of Adjustment meeting. My name is Pratik Bhakta, and I am the chair of the board. The Board of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial body that is governed by the North Carolina General Statutes and the city's Unified Development Ordinance. We're authorized to hear requests for variances from the city's Unified Development Ordinance, appeals from final determinations made by city officials charged with enforcement of the city's Unified Development Ordinance, requests for reasonable accommodations, and other requests as may be provided in the city's ordinances. All committee members and staff are participating virtually. We appreciate your patience as we work through committee meetings a bit differently. We are streaming live on our virtual engagement hub, which is accessible through the virtual engagement hub link on the front page of the city website and also linked on the Board of Adjustment page. We also have an option for the public to listen live by phone. Dial 855-925-2801, and when prompted, enter code 9255. Again, I'll restate that for anyone listening in. The public may participate by dialing 855-925-2801, and when prompted, enter the code 9255. The automated system will ask you to press *3 to be heard. Again, *3. For those of you out there with us today, welcome. I will now go through and introduce all the committee members who are participating virtually. Please make sure to mute your microphone if you're not speaking. When you have a question or would like to unmute your microphone, please remember to mute your phone after you are done speaking. Committee members, as I call your name, please say a quick hello. Rob Carroll.
Hello.
Suzanne Eskovitz.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Bill Newman.
I'm here. Thanks, Pratik.
Mr. Paul Wazinski.
I'm here. Thank you.
Okay. Also with us today is our Assistant City Attorney, Eric Edgerton. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that name again.
No, that's exactly right.
Who will be in attendance as we also have, just so you know, Rob Carroll is our alternate board member in place of our regular member, Carter Webb. And I'd also ask that anyone speaking today including staff, to state their names and titles before speaking, and that includes anybody dialing in. Today, for our agenda items, to help our audience follow along, I'll state each section of the agenda aloud and to do a vocal roll call for each vote. Additionally, I ask that committee members raise their hands to speak, and I will call upon them. And if we need to unmute and interrupt, feel free to do that if you have a question. So let's get started with the first agenda item. And that is adoption of the minutes for the January 2021 meeting.
This is Paul. I move to adopt the minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, any discussion? None? Okay, I'll move to a vote. Mr. Carroll?
Yes.
Ms. Eskovitz?
Aye.
Mr. Newman?
Aye.
Mr. Wazinski?
Aye.
And the chair says aye as well. Minutes pass, on to our next. Okay. We will now begin the evidentiary hearings for the cases listed on the agenda. In hearing cases, the board conducts a quasi-judicial evidentiary hearing. That means it is like a court hearing. State law sets specific procedures and rules concerning how this board must make its decisions. These rules are different from other types of land use decisions like rezoning cases, which are legislative in nature. This board's decisions are constrained by the standards in the city's ordinance and the facts presented at the hearing. The board hears and considers evidence presented at the hearing and applies the standards set forth in state law and the city's ordinance. The board must base its decision upon competent material and substantial evidence presented at the hearing. If you will be speaking as a witness, please focus on the facts and standards, not personal preference or opinions. Participation is limited. The meeting is open to the public. Everyone is welcome to watch. Parties have rights to participate fully. Parties may present evidence, call witnesses, and make legal arguments. Witnesses may testify as to facts to which they are competent to testify, so long as those facts relate to the legal standards. In addition, lay or non-expert witnesses' testimony is limited to facts, not opinions. For certain topics, this board needs to hear opinion testimony from expert witnesses. These topics include projections about impacts on property values and projections from impacts on traffic safety. For variance requests, 4/5 of the board vote is required to grant the variance. For all other hearing and matters, including the adoption of minutes, the decision will be made by simple majority vote of the board. Witnesses must swear or affirm their testimony, and at this time, we will administer the oath for all individuals who intend to provide witness testimony. Even if you think you will be speaking, please go ahead and take the oath. Okay. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the evidence you shall give to the board in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Just for notes, any members who join the call later that were not sworn in will have to state their name and be sworn in individually after the fact. So with the first agenda item, it's for a variance. The petitioner, Steve Farrell, agent for owner Joseph and Shelley Hummel, is requesting a variance to the development standard found in section 7-12-4 F1, grading extent of the UDO. The petitioner is seeking to amend the previously granted variance of the maximum grade allowance with steep slope zone B for the property located at 424 Sunset Drive in the Buncombe County tax record with PIN number 9649881527. Mr. Hurley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I am Ricky Hurley with the zoning section of the Development Services Department. Eric, do we need to clarify that this is actually a new variance, correct? I know there was one previously granted in 2016, correct?
That's right. And just to be very specific, our board rules have provisions for when a rehearing will be heard, but those rules apply to instances where a variance was denied. So this is a bit of a unique situation. So those rules don't apply since there was not a denial of a variance in the past. So for all intents and purposes, you're looking at this as a straight up variance request, and the same standards that normally apply to a variance request apply to the present request before the board. So there's no need to give any consideration to whether the standard for a rehearing is met. We're just going to treat this as a straightforward variance request.
Thank you, Mr. Edgerton. So as a little bit of a background, we'll start there just to help, is that this subject property was affected by two different landslides in the past, one being in 2013 and another in 2015. The prior property owner, the previous one, had to do remediation or cleanup work related to the landslides, secured permits both times for that. And as part of that work, that area of disturbance, quote unquote, the area affected, consumed all of the allowable grading area for the zone for the property. So it basically consumed everything. That's what brought the prior petitioner, prior property owner to the board in August of 2016. At that time, the board received evidence. I'm not going to rehash the evidence, but they heard evidence and granted a variance to approve that for an additional 7,350 square feet additional. That was above what would normally be allowed for this parcel within Zone B. And that area was designated as the uphill portion of the property closest to Sunset Drive. And so just kind of like to capture that, what we have today, you'll see on your slide on the screen. The first line in the row is what would be the maximum allowed of 8,233. And the 15,583 what was requested, and it was granted. And then the new total there of 17,333 is actually 1,750 square feet larger than the prior variance. So it's basically 210%. So hopefully that's not kind of convoluted, but the difference is 1,750 square feet more. Jason, you go to the next slide, please. So here's a general zoning map. As you see, most of the area is zoned RS2, residential single family. By way of orientation, most people probably know that Macon Avenue is also close to the Grove Park Inn. That is the area zoned across the street as resort. And I think that's the Longchamps condo is to the immediate south of the property. Next slide, please. And this map has the contours on it. Kind of center left of the screen, you'll see kind of more of a light brown oval shape. That is the prior landslide area that was remediated. This is a 2019 aerial photo. And then center right or almost center, you'll see some white looking fabric or something. That is the approximate footprint of the existing home. The blue line obviously delineates the parcel, tax map parcel boundary. So that's an approximate. Almost the entire parcel is subject to Zone B. 2350 elevation contour is Zone B and above. There is a slight area in Zone A in the southwest corner next to Macon Avenue. Okay. Next slide, please, Jason. So the photos that I have here for y'all were taken at a site visit that I first went out on in mid-October. I have that in the staff report. And so this is the downhill side looking up from Macon Avenue. The majority of this area in the picture is the area previously affected by the landslides in 2013 and 15. As you've seen, you see here, a large amount of underbrush regrowth did occur. Next slide, please, Jason. Another photo of that as it kind of comes down. My understanding from the applicant is this area, as you see the clean out pipe sticking up from the ground, this is the utility trench that is providing water, sewer, and I believe gas from Macon Avenue up to the home on Sunset. Next slide, please. This is the view on Sunset. This is the south side of the home, or left side if you're facing it. It was under construction. I met Mr. Williams, who's online with us today, out there on site. And I'm standing basically in the road looking here. The tree on the left is, I'd say 5 or 7 feet from edge of pavement. Next slide, please. This is, again, the south side of the home, looking down a little bit further down the slope. Next slide, please, Jason. Just wanted to document this. This tree was dead. This was in the kind of the southeast corner, close to Sunset Drive. Honestly, I do not recall when me and Miss Watford went back out in mid-February. All the trees didn't have leaves on, so I didn't actually pay attention. But this tree was clearly dead in mid-October, but it was at the very edge of the right-of-way. So I don't know if there's any mention of that here. Just wanted to show you the picture. Next slide, please, Jason. This is the north side of the house, the right-hand side to the north of the garage. Next slide, please, Jason. Mr. Williams was very gracious to take me inside the home that was under construction to let me look out for the downhill side because it is very steep and there were active crews on site. So in the very center of the screen, you will see kind of like some rocks and another pipe. This is the upper end of that utility cut. So we have the home on the most uphill side and the utility connections kind of go straight downhill in front of you and they kind of make a right-hand turn kind of to the northwest to access Macon Avenue. So that's kind of the top center here. And then you're looking at, I guess that's sonotubes or pilings for the deck above where I'm standing at. Next slide, please. We did get access here out of a door, and I'm looking directly behind the west side of the home, and you can see this is kind of the northwestern portion of the yard, I should say. So I'm looking along that west face. So you can see the earth clearing and foundation. Next slide, please, Jason. Kind of the same location. I was on that wood there in the very center right of the screen. I stepped out there. So this is kind of looking again northwest, the tree line. Next slide, please, Jason. Okay. At the very beginning of the notice of violation process, me and Mr. Williams did work on trying to achieve an estimate. You know, it's been a very wet winter, hard to walk the site. So he had been on the site for a couple years, I believe. This is an approximation of that. Next slide, please, Jason. And then so we did get a letter from Mr. Williams. And at that time, the initial estimate was $74.50. I know it's kind of small here, which would have been 100 square feet over. That in and of itself, there's no discretion for staff. So even a square foot larger would have triggered a new variance. So it's sort of an academic number, but it is over. And then, of course, this was at the end of December. Next slide, please, Jason. And then Mr. Farrell, also the applicant's petitioner here today for us. We had a lot of discussion about, and I've learned a lot about how things are surveyed. You know, you get into the weeds about planimetrics versus, you know, the slope of property. And there was some disagreement about how much we had estimated. So he had a new number of 6,219 square feet. And here's his letter. Next slide, please. And there's some calculations he provided to support that. Next slide, please, Jason. And just showing how you would correct for slope versus how things are actually drawn in a plane view. I know this is very technical. I just wanted to make sure we had this in the record. Next slide, please. Again, more from another elevation home. This was the north side. And next slide, please, Jason. So this was the approved grading plan that was compliant with the variance from 2018, provided by I believe it's the architect. I don't want to put that words in his mouth here, but this was the approved grading plan. It was survey. Next slide, please. And so I mentioned earlier that me and Mrs. Watford, our grading and site engineering coordinator, my cohort, we made a visit with the architect on site. He agreed to meet us out there. We were very gracious for that opportunity to kind of visit the site again. I believe it was February 24th of this year to kind of double check measurements to make sure we got this right. We did able to walk the site on a very nice day, kind of a little bit of a dry period. And these are kind of our basic measurements. Next slide, please, Jason. And then Mrs. Watford done some correction for slope and taking into account the utility cut. So the total area that we calculated was 9,100 or so square feet. And next slide, please, Jason. And of course, I just have this in exhibit. I don't know necessarily that we need to get into that, but there was a slope report by the geotechnical that's in the board packet. You should have had a chance to look through that. It is also just coincidentally the same geotechnical, I believe, engineer, correct, Steve, that done the site back in 2016 for the variance. So that's kind of fortuitous that they kept the same person, very familiar with the remediation that occurred. And Jason, what was my next slide? I think I had it in the packet, the variance order, just so you could review that. You see the conditions or information that was provided. Eric, if you feel like that was not necessary, we can strike that from the packet, but I just had it for information.
That's
all right. And then Mr. Farrell did include in January this information as well. I just wanted to make sure he had his applicant information in the slides for Exhibit 2 and 3, I believe. Yes, that I just zoomed in. This is just a zoomed in for you, Steve, of the data. So is there any specific questions? I didn't want to read the staff report. It was kind of lengthy. I hope you had the opportunity to read that. I just didn't want to read that out verbatim to y'all.
I have a question, Mr. Hurley, if I can ask.
Yes, ma'am.
The previous variance approval included that lower septic part, the utility cut, I guess, and this application is referring to the upper side of the utility cut. Is that right?
The previous variance actually kind of include a semicircular, half moon shaped or half circle shape that, let's see here, it's pretty much a lot of the area you see where the, I think there's silt fence delineated. There's like 2 rows of silt fence here.
Yeah.
That's kind of like congruent with or kind of the same path of the blue lines Nancy's drawn. That was kind of the general shape of the variance. It did not include or was no area specified in that 400 square foot in the lower left, kind of connecting down to the lower half of the property. So there was nothing in that area delineated. Now, granted, that was representative of 7,350. I don't know if the board would have been so tight. I think we would have allowed that cut to occur so long as we didn't exceed the board's authority in that case.
But we don't have a graphic showing the total extent of grading in the previous application. I guess they just showed this. They didn't show any of the landslide and disturbance.
No, the landslide disturbance had occurred and it wasn't really part of the variance. It was the reason for the rationale behind the variance.
Right.
I guess it would have been helpful to maybe have seen where that touch, the end of utility cut there at that, I think it's about 2400, 2440, where it ends, where that utility cut ends.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see here. Jason's going up here. Where it says utility cut, where we have the word utility cut and the line stops, that pretty much joins where the remediation began. There's like a little road bench in there. And so that bench, the old logging road, is where the water was pooling. And they had done some remediation work right in there. So there's some collection devices right there. And from there to the left is all downhill. That is the area of prior land disturbance. So it basically, the utility cut touches up to the former landslide.
Okay. I was just wondering if there was overlap, but what you're saying is that there really wasn't any kind of overlap.
No, we would have discounted that. We were only concerned about the new area.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
And that's what Ms. Watford has delineated here as the new area of concern.
Okay. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. Mr. Wozinski?
Yes, I've got two questions. The first one, just to verify, this is an after the fact request, right? What is being asked has already been done.
Correct. This was the result of a notice of violation we sent out at the very end of November, and then we've been working with the applicant during late winter, midwinter on this. So yes, it is after a fact.
Okay. And the second question is, on the application, question number 3, the one that says the hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner. The response is the hardship is not a result of actions taken by the owner. The hardship is a result of inaccurate measuring by the city of Asheville, including portions of Sunset Drive, which is a paved road and was most certainly not disturbed. Would you agree that the hardship is a result of inaccurate measuring by the city of Asheville?
Well, I think that was the initial discussion because they had to get the application in before their extension expired. And so they filed it January 22nd. And that was the initial discussions that we were having with the applicant, that we were afraid that maybe because of this whole thing about slope and planimetric and how everything is surveyed and engineerly designed, hence the reason why we had to we requested that we push this off to a March meeting so that Nancy and I could dig into that further, because there was some concern or contestment that we weren't taking that practice into account. We were measuring the slope and not measuring the planimetric, how things are actually done in the world in an engineering design professional skill set. So I don't want to come out and say I don't want to disagree or make the case or for or against the applicant. We do have Mr. Farrell with us, so he might go explain a little bit better than me on that. But that was the rationale behind it while we had the case. We asked for a 1-month delay. It's just so we could correct it. Me and Nancy walked it, and we are of pretty firm opinion that there's not a measurement error, at least not one enough that's inconsistent to result on being compliant or not compliant. It may be, could be how far out of compliance, but there's certainly we're 100% confident. I feel 100% confident they are out of compliance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have any further questions for staff? Okay.
I might have another question later about this whole planimetric issue, but I'll hold it until after the applicant speaks.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mr. Farrell?
Hey, everybody. My name is Stephen Smith Farrell. I'm a licensed architect in private practice in Asheville. Been a licensed architect for 25 years. And curiously, I was and remain a full-throated advocate of the steep slope ordinance. So if we have, conversation today, it's about semantics. It's not about the appropriateness of the ordinance, which I think is essential to this community that I love. I also want to thank the board for being here and being of service to the community. I have and continue to serve on several boards myself. I know it can be thankless and difficult work. It is very much appreciated. I'd also like to thank staff. Again, 25 years of practice have come to depend on the professionalism that we see from staff. Again, it's a very difficult job and can be very thankless, but I want staff to know that we really do appreciate the work they do on behalf of the citizens. So we're here today to request a variance for an additional 1,750 square feet. This of a lot of a total area of 54,885 square feet, which represents about 3% of the total area. by way of explanation why we're before you today, and this is not an excuse, but an explanation, there are several points I'd like to make. This was just a complicated project, as evidenced by the time we've been working on it. It's the most complicated house I've ever done, and I've done hundreds of them. We had horrible weather. Every time we would dig the footings, it would snow or rain, and we'd have to pull the steel out and clean the footings out. And I think Steve Williams is to be commended for keeping the silt fences operational during what, by any accounts, have been some of the wettest winters in recorded history. Obviously, the topography is very challenging. We did put the house on the least steep portion of the property. Let's see. Also, by way of explanation, we must confess to not being able to watch a subcontractor 24/7, and sometimes they do get outside the lines. They color outside the lines. And then finally, we may have been overly generous in our application of mulch, knowing now that that is counted towards disturbed area. We might have held back a little bit. So those are why we are here. I want to tell you what we have done to protect the community's interest and to respect the intent of the steep slope ordinance. We have worked with a licensed geotechnical engineering firm, and as Ricky said, it's the very same firm that did the remedial work in 2016, which constituted some pretty substantial engineering and drains that were installed between the house and the former landslide area. There's like an intermittent spring that runs there, and when it really flows, it causes a problem. So we worked with the same engineers, so they were familiar with the project, and as of course is required per the steep slope ordinance, we worked with them and followed the letter of their recommendations, and as a result, we have requested and received their certification that our actions have not increased geotechnical instability. We've also worked very hard to restabilize areas that were disturbed with native grasses, many trees, and many shrubs. It bears mentioning we installed 2 silt fences when only 1 was required, and I think that was a good move. Again, no one could have anticipated these historic rain events and snow events that we've had. Let's see. So that's what we've done. We followed the rules. We got a little bit over the lines, and part of that was, I just didn't understand that mulching it constituted a change to the surface of the earth, and Miss Watford helped me understand that. So going forward, I'll benefit from that information. So that's kind of how we got here and what we've done. And here's what we propose. Was one other thing we've done. We have instituted a regularly scheduled maintenance program to clean the drains that the geotechnical engineers designed. When the Hummels, the present owners, took possession of the property, the drains were completely clogged. And so, the best engineering in the world won't work if it's not maintained. So we have taken a very active role in cleaning those drains and making sure they flow and work properly. Let's see. So what we're willing to do is to plant additional native shrubs. I'd recommend blueberries because they're good for the birds and they look nice, and they would thrive in this hot western sloping property. We would also propose to plant an additional 7 native evergreen trees. And this is in addition to I think we've put 21 in so far. So there'd be another 7 is my proposal. And then we would commit to continuing to maintain the drain that needs to be kept clean in order to prevent another landslide. And so with that, I will throw myself on the mercy of the board. And again, I thank you for your service to the citizens of Asheville. Yes, sir.
Mr.
If the board declined the request to grant the variance, what would you do?
I'd probably go drink a shot of whiskey, but I don't know. Eric, what would happen?
The code enforcement process that had started and resulted in the issuance of an NOV would continue. There may be alternate ways of addressing the issues that could lead the property owner before the Urban Forestry Commission in order to come up with a alternative landscaping plan that could be accepted. That it's difficult to say at this point in time because, as you've noted, Mr. Wilczynski, this is an after the fact variance. So the short answer is the code enforcement process would continue to play out, and there may be other alternative ways of addressing this increased area of disturbance that the property owner could come up with and propose. But the next step would be we would continue to enforce the NOV.
Any further questions?
Let me ask one more question of Mr. Edgerton. If that happened and a different variance was required, they couldn't come back for another variance for a year, right?
I believe that would be correct, because then we would actually be in the situation that I discussed at the top of this matter, which is that a variance request would have been denied at that point, and then they would have to be able to present evidence sufficient to justify a rehearing in accordance with the board's rules.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions for the petitioner's agent? Mr. Carroll?
What stage is construction at right now?
We're done.
You're complete. When did it finish?
Steve, when was the CO?
About 4 weeks ago.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? Ms. Gotzi?
So was this I guess this is a question for Mr. Edgerton. Was this their only recourse? I mean, could they have gone to the Urban Forestry Commission at the outset to alleviate this notice of violation?
It would not have completely addressed the situation, because this is the total area of disturbed site, as opposed to just a landscaping issue, which the UFC would have handled. So this is the more appropriate course of action. And so ultimately the question for the board is whether the physical hardships imposed by these past landslides would justify an area of disturbance that is in effect on the ground. The previous iteration of this board found that it would have justified an increased area of disturbance that Mr. Hurley has noted. The question now is just whether those same facts would justify a level of disturbance that we're looking at with the completed house available to observe.
So as a follow-up, if anybody's in the steep slope and they are in violation of their limits of disturbance and they're over what they're allowed, they would be coming to the Board of Adjustment for an after-the-fact variance as the most logical recourse?
It would be, yes.
Okay, thanks.
So I have a question as well. Going back to what Mr. Wilczynski said, with the standards of granting a variance, number 3, the hardship is not a result of the actions taken by the owner. So which do you contend is accurate? What the city measured, what you measured, what, can you explain that?
I accept, at the time, I didn't accept, and I think there was a legitimate concern that the folks in the city were measuring the surface and not the planimetric measurements. So when I wrote that, that was true. So since then, they've come out and carefully measured it, and as you can see, they have corrected for planimetrics. If there is a discrepancy, and obviously there is, it's in how one measures disturbance. Quite frankly, I didn't think mulch constituted disturbance. At the time, I didn't. I've come to understand that anything you do to the surface of the soil, including mulch, constitutes disturbance. I think it bears mentioning that grading is a very imprecise science, and this rule, its intention is really clear and good, but it's just not easy to watch a backhoe grader every single day, or a track hoe operator. I don't know if I answered your question, but
No, I think you did. And Mr. Farrell, would you be willing to go to the forest? What was the commission to do what they say if that's a condition of approval?
It's hard to say without knowing what they would require. I can tell you, I've spoken with the clients, and they are more than eager to provide plants and trees to, almost anyone's recommendation. At this point, they're a little gun shy about where to do that, knowing that the act of digging a hole constitutes, an exaggeration of this problem. So, I want to say a qualified, I do think that would be fine, but I just don't know what they would require. I don't guess anyone could. I can tell you, as an advocate for the citizens of Asheville, as well as the clients, the preferable action is to be done with this and to move forward with a great addition to the neighborhood and a great addition to the tax base that benefits all the citizens of Asheville. And I should point out, does so in a way that respects to the letter the geotechnical engineer's recommendations and specifications. So there's no possible interpretation that this 1,750 feet has increased risk to the citizens of Asheville, or we wouldn't have got that certification. And so we're going above and beyond, and respectfully request acceptance of this application for 1,750 square feet on a 54,885 square foot property.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for the plaintiff's representatives? Sorry, petitioner's representatives, excuse me. No?
Hello. Hi, this is Joe Holm. I'm actually the homeowner. I've been listening to y'all today, and I thank you very much for the time and attention you've been taking to this matter. And I just wanted to say, my wife and I, Shelley, are so happy to be in the neighborhood. And we absolutely agree with the steep slope ordinance, and we wanted to respect that from the start. And I know that Steve Farrell and Steve Williams both really were very, very stringent and close upon that from the start. We knew what we were dealing with, and they're advocates for the community just like we are. And I can just say, having been at the site multiple times during construction, when those backhoe guys are moving around, and I see, and I just one day I was there talking to a gentleman who was actually doing some of the clearing, and he was trying to get the utilities up, and he had the swing, and he's like, "Oh boy, I can't swing and not knock your steel post down for your fence without without moving this thing back another foot." Well, a 7-foot wide machine going back a foot, disturbs X amount of area. And that happened 2 or 3 times that day. And I know they were very, very cautious. I know that they, love the land and the trees, and Asheville as much as, Mr. Farrell and Mr. Williams do, and as my wife and I do. And I think it was just such a challenging slope. And I do want to commend, both of them and everyone that's been involved in the project to be able to get it done and to be that close, because we really thought that we were within the guidelines the whole time and operating very, very closely. But, you can see how, on such a steep slope with so many terrain issues and so many, different obstacles that this, could never be happen. And I think, we really were watching that, and we kept the footprint literally as small as we possibly could for the desires for the house, with be able to fulfill that. We were out last weekend, and I did replant 2 of the trees that had died, and I went to the nursery and told them we're going to be buying some more trees once we have this variance. And I just want everyone on the phone to understand, and that's evolved, that we in no way, there was no intention on anybody's behalf to try and make any disruptive moves on this property. And I think, again, they did a beautiful job with it, and we just want to make it right so that we are following the law, and we get the variance that we need to live there happily and be productive members of the community, and to keep the neighborhood looking nice, and to follow all the rules as they stand. So again, I just want to thank people for their time and their attention to this, because these things matter for the community. So I know it's taken a lot of hours and a lot of people to get these together, and we do stand behind that and are glad this is happening, and we just want to help make it right too.
Did Mr. Hummel, did you get sworn in at the beginning?
I'm sorry, I did not. I missed the 2 minutes. I'm here in the hospital, and I was running in between folks. So I did not. I apologize if I broke policy or protocol. Excuse me.
So let me swear you in real quick. Do you solemnly swear that the witness testimony you just gave was the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you. Any further questions from staff or our board for the petitioners? Okay, none. Then we're going to close that section and open it up for public comments.
Okay, we do have 3 callers in the queue. I do see a lot of callers on the line. So if you're interested in speaking in the meeting, please hit the star key on your phone and number 3, and then I'll bring you in one by one. So I'll bring in the first caller now.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm on my phone.
Yes. Have you been sworn in?
No, I haven't. Well, I said so, but you didn't hear me.
Okay. Just state your name and proceed.
All right. My name is Sharon Sumrall, and I'm a member of the Urban Forestry Commission. And professionally, I'm a landscape contractor over 40 years. And I was contacted in August of 2020 by concerned neighbors regarding the continued clearing of existing trees and the soil erosion. So after listening to the report and hearing from Mr. Edgerton that this is a straight request, I'm not going to go into all my explanation from the previous Board of Adjustments. Ricky explained it pretty well. And I've got 2 things I need to take it down to the grading issue. I came out during, and Mr. Smith is correct, there was a whole load of rain. I did come out and look at the bottom of the property on Macon when there was considerable amount of silting and soil washing down, as there had been after they had dug the utility trench. And I had looked at the old plans and saw that a part of that area was part of the previous landslide, and there was no silt fencing up at that time, even though they had done a considerable amount of trenching in the utilities area. And then right after a lot of water washed down on soil down to Macon, then I think it was the next couple of days the silt fencing went back up. And then I had a lot of people question me about the trees, which is not applicable, but I have a comment on, and if I have enough time, I'll make a couple of statements on that. I did contact zoning and ask them to measure the area because I had so many neighbors contact me and said it seemed to be way over the area that was allowed to be graded and not wanting to trespass. I wasn't sure, and so zoning went out. I did look at the previous reports from Appalachian Landslides Consultants, stating they recommend adding more substantial vegetation like small trees and shrubs. There were a number of hardwood trees that were removed. during this utility trench and other grading areas that were not on this plan, that were not surveyed. But basically, what we'd like to say, I'd like to say in conclusion, is seeing how this is in a steep slope B and already definitive clearing requirements, already troubled with past history of erosion, the owner and contractor should have been alert to all the grading parameters and should have been hyper vigilant to all that is required when grading on such a sensitive location. Paying attention to such matters is detrimental to the safety of our neighbors and detrimental to our mountain environs. And I appreciate everybody's concern being on steep slope B and having dealt with equipment operators my whole career. When I'm in a steep slope or in a dangerous area, I watch what's being graded, I watch what's being done, and it's just part what I do as being responsible landscape licensed contractors. And so therefore, I am concerned about the amount of grading and how it was handled. I understand being in the construction business, things get out of hand. I'd also like to note that it's good to hear about the planting. Personally, I wouldn't put blueberries in. You're going to have more deer up there than you've ever wanted in a lifetime. You put blueberries up there, they probably won't have a chance to leap out and vegetate. That is deer's favorite thing to eat. And also, I would say that if this does go to the Urban Forestry Commission, which I don't think it will, but if it does, that we would recommend some of the hardwoods to be replanted. And I don't speak for everybody, I speak for myself. And it is possible to plant the trees without disturbing a whole lot more surface area. There's a way that it can be done. You can use a smaller tree, berm it up, and you can even deal with the berms. So I appreciate you for listening, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? If not, we'll move to the next caller. Please state your name and whether you're sworn in or not.
Okay, bringing the next caller in.
Hi, my name is Suzanne Eskovitz, and I did say yes to being sworn in. I don't know if you heard me or not.
Okay, proceed.
Okay, my name is Suzanne Eskovitz, and I've lived in the Grove Park neighborhood for 13 years. I'm the current president of the Grove Park Sunset Mountain Neighborhood Association. It's been common knowledge in the neighborhood that the lot for 424 Sunset Drive, which extends down to Macon Avenue, was the spot where rubble from the construction of the Grove Park Inn was dumped during the inn's construction. I witnessed the damage caused by the July 2013 mudslide, a time when the lot had trees and vegetation and no house construction on a narrow section of Sunset Drive, and the consequences for neighbors in the Grove Park Inn during that situation. When the lot was sold, our neighborhood association and area residents supported the City of Asheville staff's recommendation that a house be allowed to be built at the base along Macon Avenue. Instead, the Board of Adjustments went against the city staff recommendation and allowed a home to be built at the top of the lot. My husband and I often walked past the construction and were shocked by the owner's lack of consideration for the neighborhood in stabilizing what qualifies as a steep slope, arbitrarily closing Sunset Drive both at Old Toll and Fairmont with handmade signs and without permits. They blocked Sunset Drive. They've left dumpsters uncovered, resulting in trash all over the street, removed living trees, and in addition, and this is probably the most serious, is they're very heavy trucks packed down the stormwater ditches, and I'm talking about the other side of Sunset, so that their tires wouldn't get stuck. They filled the drainage ditches with stone, and they've left them there. And the result is all that packed stone has resulted in stormwater flowing into the road instead of into the storm ditches, which amounts to a serious disturbance of Sunset Drive. Contrary to the claim in the application for a revised variance, Sunset Drive has been disturbed. Just in the past few weeks, the owner's agent placed a commercial sign in front of the notice sign for this meeting So anyone driving north on Sunset wouldn't see the notice. And a lot of us in the neighborhood have pictures and other things like this. Neighbors logged formal complaints, but nothing much happened. So I realize that a lot of that is not on point with the variance request, but on behalf of the neighborhood, it just sounds like you're going to reward an ongoing long list of bad behaviors by giving them a variance to the variance. And that's just not right, because it was clearly spelled out what they had to do. If they had any questions, they could have, as Sharon just said, checked on it, verified things, but they didn't. They just forged ahead, and now after the fact, this is all coming forward. My concern is knowing the damage that was caused in the 2013 mudslide, and now what's happened to the lot, what's going to happen the next time, especially to the houses in the immediate area and the Longchamps building. So I ask that the Board of Adjustment not grant a new variance and instead require the owners to mitigate the percentage of the lot where they've already exceeded the terms of the original variance and restore the stormwater ditches all along Sunset Drive in the vicinity of the house. And thank you very much for allowing me to speak at this meeting.
Thank you. Next caller.
Bringing in the next one now.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My name is Tom Gurley, and I live at 285 Macon Avenue, which is up the street, two properties above the subject property. My property runs from Macon Avenue all the way up to Sunset Drive. I've lived there since 2012. My main concern, the reason for calling in, is stormwater runoff from this 424 property onto neighboring properties. I was at home in 2013 during the rain event that led to that landslide in July of 2013. So, and I had a torrent of water on my property, and I had erosion that had to be repaired. So I'm well aware of the damage that stormwater runoff can do. Over the course of this construction project over the last couple of years, but most especially since the additional large mature trees were removed and there was additional clearing last year, I've seen additional stormwater runoff onto my property following rain events on the left side of the property. That is the side from the direction of the 424 Sunset property. It's more runoff than I've been used to seeing since I've been there since 2012, and it's showing up in places that I've never seen it before. And I had to have a contractor come in last fall to beef up the drainage around my driveway. He's not finished. He needs to come back this spring and do some more work. I was also present at the 2016 meeting when the existing variance was approved. And I recall an exhibit that was shown at that meeting. That there was a drawing that was shown that showed the footprint of a house that could be built at the top there on Sunset Drive, that was shown as justification for the amount of clearing that was being requested. I note that the house that has actually been built there is larger than what was shown in that exhibit in 2016. It's more roof area, a larger footprint, so there's more impervious surface area than was envisioned when that previous variance was approved. And now we know that additional large trees have been removed, and there's more vegetation that's been removed. And as you've just heard, and I just recently learned, the drainage ditch on Sunset Drive has been closed. So it's no surprise to me that I'm seeing this additional runoff, and I'm very concerned about it. I think that the property owner where the runoff is originating should take responsibility for mitigating the runoff. It shouldn't be the responsibility of neighbors who are the recipients of that runoff. So my request is that this variance be denied. But in any case, whether it's approved or denied, there must be conditions. The homeowner and the contractor must restore the trees and the vegetation on the slope. But I recognize that some of the trees that were removed were large, mature trees, and so it's going to be years before that vegetation is really restored. So I also request that they take measures to contain the stormwater runoff within their property, whether it's with berms or pipes or whatever, to keep that stormwater runoff from running off onto neighboring properties. I think if this variance is approved, especially if it's approved without conditions, then we might as well not have the steep slope ordinance. And I know I've heard people supporting the steep slope ordinance, so I hope that everyone will do the right thing by this. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you for the call. Do we have any more callers?
Yep. I'll bring in the next one right now.
Okay.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello, ready when you are.
Okay, if the caller would state their name, and have you been sworn in?
Yes, I was sworn in at the top of the meeting. My name is John Quinn. Thank you for this opportunity to testify, and thank you all, Board of Adjustment members, for your service to the community. I do the Board of Elections myself, and I appreciated the earlier comments about thankless tasks, but thank you so much for what you do. Anyway, I live at 428 Sunset Drive, and that is the property immediately adjacent to 424 Sunset Drive. When this board was petitioned for a variance to the steep slope ordinance in 2016, staff presented a case that described a, quote, request to disturb 7,350 square feet in order to build a 2,500 square foot single-story home with a detached 900 square foot garage. The variance was approved in August of 2016. But what has been constructed is more along the lines of a 4,500 square foot multi-story residence with an attached garage, a much larger project than originally planned and approved. In other words, this board was presented and approved one proposal, but the ensuing project used a different plan. Now, as was noted earlier, the date of the application for this variance was January 22nd, 2021. But the additional grading for which this variance is sought began in August 2020 with follow-up in September 2020. Now, I notified the city of Asheville
as soon as the grading began in August. I did it via the Asheville app, which I have been told is the best way to raise these issues to the city's attention. What the city of Asheville did was they closed that inquiry without taking any action. I followed up in September 2020, a month later, when the huge path had been carved from Macon all the way up to the house. I was frustrated by the fact that the city of Asheville would not respond, especially considering that we have a complaint-based enforcement system. I was right next to the property. I have had to monitor this project for 2 hellish years. I am very grateful the project is done, but I am very frustrated that the city would not respond to my issues. And so I have learned today that what prompted the application in January was a complaint that was issued in October. Now, I had nothing to do with that October complaint. I don't know where it came from, but I thank whoever started that ball rolling. I question why the analysis provided in the architect's letter of February 1st, 2021 was not performed prior to the grading that occurred in the summer of 2020. As has been noted earlier, development on steep slopes requires a great deal of care, and had the architect and or general contractor been exercising that level of care, this analysis would have been completed and the city would have been approached for another variance before the fact, instead of nearly half a year after the fact. But then I have to confess that I'm not all that surprised that once again with this project, the folks are seeking permission or seeking forgiveness after the fact rather than having sought permission when they should have. And I've got some examples. As was noted by Ms. Eskovitz, the trash and refuse disposal on that site was horrible, especially in the early days of the project in 2019. It was so bad that I know that members of the community complained to the city. I spoke with David Kitt myself, and ultimately the contractor was directed to do a better job of trash and refuse disposal. And this was because bears and crows and whatnot were being attracted to this open disposal trailer on Sunset Drive, a true public health and safety menace. So I was glad that the contractor complied, but it did take the city reaching out and directing him. A real bugaboo for me has been the contractor's unwillingness to abide by the city's street closure permitting requirements. Over the course of this project, Mr. Williams requested street closures 3 times, and that third one, which was in 2020, he requested an extension. So basically 4 closures. Well, when Mr. Williams started this project, he did not bother with street closure permits at all. And there was a lot of heavy equipment brought onto the site to do grading and to pour tons and tons of concrete. When I spoke with Mr. Kitt, it became apparent that Mr. Williams had not been requesting such street closures, and apparently Mr. Kitt got with him because street closure permits were subsequently requested. However, the requirements of the street closure permits were not met. The city of Asheville has a policy where neighbors are to be notified at least a week in advance of the street closure. I live immediately adjacent to the property. Not once did Mr. Williams notify me or my wife of an impending street closure. That was over a 2-year period. Finally, the owners, when I pointed out to them that when you have a moving truck in the middle of Sunset Drive closing the street to passage, you've got to get a permit to do that. And they did. So I found that there are people in my neighborhood, these new owners, did exactly what they were supposed to do with street closure permit. But Mr. Williams, not once did he notify us, and in only one instance did he post the requisite signage for a street closure. In every other instance, all he did was take a traffic cone, put it in the street, and scrawl on a piece of cardboard attached to a stick, "Street closed." That doesn't comply with anything that the city of Asheville requires. But that has been the pattern and practice of Mr. Williams. Thumb your nose at regulation, do what you want, and then after the fact, if you need to beg permission, you just go ahead and beg permission. Staff recommends approving this new variance because an unnecessary hardship would result from the strict application of the ordinance. The hardship results from the conditions that are peculiar to the property, such as location, size, or topography. The hardship did not result from actions taken by the applicant or the property owner, and the requested variance is consistent with the spirit, purpose, and intent of the ordinance. I dispute that. The hardship is, in fact, the result of actions of the petitioners and their agents, and any hardship could have been easily avoided by adhering to the variance previously granted and by applying for this new variance before additional ground clearing was undertaken. I was disappointed to hear the mulch excuse. I hope that you discount that. And I beg that you please deny this variance because it is being sought in bad faith. Thank you for this opportunity to testify. And please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions? Okay. Do we have any more callers?
Okay, I do see some callers on the line, but no more in the queue. So if we could just give everyone a moment. If you want to speak on your phone, please hit the star key and number 3, and I'll bring you in. If we can just give them a moment to do that if they need to. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody remaining on the call that has entered the queue.
Okay. I'll close public comment. Open it up for board comments. Thoughts, board members?
Yeah, this is Paul. If the board wanted to consider granting the variance, I would be interested in talking about putting 2 conditions on the grant. The first one having to do with the Urban Forestry Commission. I don't know how they work, but the idea of the condition would be that the applicant ask them for their suggestions as to what should be done on the property, and that they follow the suggestions of the Forestry Commission. And the second one relating to what several people have, what several callers have mentioned with the stormwater ditches being, one person said clogged and another person said closed, resulting in increased runoff. And the second condition I would like to see would be that the property owner did some sort of remediation to stop that increased water runoff. And that's it.
Okay. Mr. Carroll, I think you raised your hand as well.
Yeah, I'm not sure that remediating clogged drainage ditch is a matter for this hearing. I mean, that's some action the city, I would have thought, should take anyway.
Okay. Any other further comments? Okay, I have, go ahead.
Sorry, yeah, one of the callers mentioned that the original variance was based on a 2,500 square foot house, and that the current one is 4,500 square feet. does the city support those facts?
I can answer that in a minute. I know Ms. Godsey raised her hand too, so if I can answer a couple questions at once, if that's okay.
Mr. Hurley, I have a question for Mrs. Watford. So if you want to go ahead and answer that question.
Mr. Carroll, yeah, I believe that variance did show like a footprint of like a 2,000 or 20-some-hundred square foot house. I do know the house that is currently constructed is multiple levels. So I do believe it is closer, and Mr. Williams might be able to tell us the actual square footage of the home, or Mr. Farrell. But it did have at least 2 levels. There might even been a partial third. I can't say, but it seemed to be closer. I don't want to guess. It seemed to be closer to around 2,000, 2,500 square foot footprint. But if you want to know the footprint, we might have to ask the actual general contractor or the architect on that.
No, I don't need the actual numbers. I just needed a feel for what was originally there versus what has been built.
Yeah, the house plan that we see here was presented on the approved site plan that's in the packet, and they showed complying with the grading limits at the time, at least what they indicate on their plans.
Okay.
All right.
Ms. Godsey, anything further?
I had a question for Mrs. Watford. Are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Could you, there's been a lot of conversation about mulch and whether that's considered disturbed area or not. Just for clarification, can you talk about the history with this project?
So I don't know how it relates to mulch, but when land disturbance is defined by the state, it is a change in the cover of the earth. So that means like that even if you put a house on piers, the underneath portion of the house is still land disturbance, whether you actually do grading work, changing the elevation, or you're just removing the cover. So it's also where we get like gravel versus, is laying out gravel, new land disturbance. That's where that comes from. And that was that conversation I think that he was alluded to. I don't necessarily think that we would say that putting mulch into an area where there was already like leaves and such is necessarily land disturbance. But if you're clearing out any underbrush and clearing out any sort of stability factors, then it would be. But so, I do know when we measured this, we stayed within the limits of the mulch, figuring that when they laid mulch, that they probably went outside of the limits that were of the actual disturbance area. So we were, what would you say, Ricky, a foot or two in, at least, in different areas? Like I know on the downside bank, we were a little bit more conservative in our measurements. So there was more, like at least 2 feet or more. So does that help?
Yeah, that helps me a lot. And a follow-up question to the stormwater. Obviously, you've been hearing the issues that the neighbors have been discussing on stormwater. Do you have any updates on what the conditions are up there currently? Is everything back to normal?
I don't know.
Would that be responsibility of the city, or would that be the responsibility of the last homeowner to do construction up there?
It would be the responsibility of whoever created the impact, I would say, if we, so, and that's, I think it's Public Works who would make some of that determination. We've got to check with our inspectors and with Public Works, who knows the ditches and those crews, to have them go and check, and I think it would fall to them.
Yeah.
I have some portion of it from an inspection from a site enforcement side if the permit's still open.
Well, based on that, I think that tying that condition to any variance that's granted may not be the best way to go about it, just to have the neighbors call Public Works to meet on site to see if there's any remediation that needs to happen and not have it be tied to our variance. Because they're going to need to weigh in on what needs to be done out there anyway. And I don't know that we want to tie a property owner to, I don't know, it just seems like there's a course of action that can be taken to remediate any kind of ditch lines that need to be repaired and that type of thing. And then the condition about the Urban Forestry Commission, I do have some concerns there, because going to the Urban Forestry Commission and just saying, hey, work it out there, it's a completely subjective body. There's no parameters and then they're horse trading for a condition of their variance. I just think it would be cleaner if we just either granted the variance or we didn't grant the variance. But I see what you're saying, Paul, but I just feel I have some concerns with granting a variance just based on those two conditions, or granting a variance at all, but still, the conditions concern me a little bit. And those are my reasons why. That's it.
Okay. So, while I feel for, the petitioners and the callers, we as a board are tasked with very described rules, and that is we don't have unlimited discretion. What we can do is grant a variance based on 4 rules, and that is unnecessary hardship, hardship resulting from conditions peculiar to the property, results taken by the applicant, and whether the hardship or the variance is in spirit and purpose. And all of those things really have to comply for a variance to be granted. I can see 3 out of the 4, but the number 3, which is a hardship did not result from the actions taken by the applicant or the property owner, I just can't see that, because this was granted, this was done. Whoever can cast the blame, that's still a result of the petitioner and their agents. So, the petitioner would have to remedy that with their agents and or the city. But as it stands, based on those rules, I would say number 3 does not fall within the yes category for me. So, any further comments?
Chair,
yes.
I believe we have another person in the call queue. It may be a previous caller, I'm not sure, but somebody else has entered the queue.
Okay, I'm going to open up public comments again, so the caller can weigh in.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, this is Suzanne Eskovitz again, and I've been listening to the back and forth on the stormwater, and just so and the drainage dishes, and just so I'm clear, what the owners have done is on the opposite side of Sunset Drive, their contractors have filled in the drainage ditches with large rocks, and then as the weight of the large delivery trucks, and these were massive trucks, weighted those rocks down, more and more got added, so that those trucks' tires would not go off the road and those vehicles get stuck up there. And all of that stone and all of that blockage remains up there. So I don't understand why you can't do something, because this is a problem. Stormwater is a problem in the slopes of our neighborhood. And with the concrete and all the other construction that's happening, it's just accelerating. But what happened here was deliberate, and they knew it, and then they left it. So I don't understand why there can't be something where if it's fixed, and tax dollars should not go to fixing this. This should be the responsibility of the owners. If it's fixed, then they can reapply for this new variance. But they need to show some good faith that they intend to fix what they've damaged before you can give them a pass on what they've done. And I felt it was important to clarify the extent of what we're talking about on that road. And thank you again for opening up public comment.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to close public comments again. Further thoughts? If not, I'm looking for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll jump in just to clarify one point again, and this is what I referred to at the top of the meeting, which is that this should be treated as a new standalone variance request. And so in that regard, I know that there was focus paid in the attention paid in the application to a discrepancy in how the site disturbance was measured. Realistically, the hardship that you all are being presented testimony regarding are two landslides that occurred. And so the question of who caused the hardship is not, you're not bound to what was included in the application regarding just differences of opinion on how the site disturbance should be measured. You're fully entitled to consider any and all evidence that's been presented to the board. You're not limited to the identification of that one measurement issue in the application. So happy to answer any further questions you may have on that, but just wanted to clarify that you are not strictly bound to what's included in the application.
Correct. And Mr. Edgerton, my comment was more in line with the, I know it's a new application for a different variance than what was granted in 2016. But again, it was approved then, and it was gone beyond and above what that was. So, when you do that, you're asking then to say, we didn't follow the guidelines then, so we're asking for something that we've already done in retrospect, and not necessarily the measurements. Okay, looking for a motion.
This is Paul. I move to grant the request for the variance.
Is there a second?
And just for the purposes of clarity, if there are going to be any conditions attached to the variance, those would need to be enumerated in the motion itself. So I hate to complicate things, but if there's an anticipated need for conditions, it would be best to have those included up front.
Yeah, originally I would have included my two conditions, but I think I'm going to not. But thank you for that reminder.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. I seen the applicant, Mr. Farrell, raise his hand. I'm not sure if you've closed the public hearing yet or not.
We have, but if the petitioner wishes to speak, we have a motion on the floor. I'll allow it.
I just wanted to say that I know I speak for the owners when I say that we would be more than willing to clean out the storm ditch to the east, Steve?
Yes.
We didn't because we thought that it actually performed better. But if you guys want it out, yeah, we'll take it out.
Okay. Again, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second on that motion?
Mr. Bhakta, this is Paul again. Can I just mention one thing about my motion for people who have not heard me say this before? I am always in favor of considering motions in a positive way, in the sense of always asking to grant the request, because if you vote on granting the request and you say yes, that means yes, give them the variance. And if you say no, it means no, don't give them the variance. Whereas if you make a motion that says, I'm moving to deny the request, then, and I have to think about this because it always confuses me. If you say yes to that motion, then you're saying no, don't grant the variance. And if you say no to that request, then you're saying yes, grant the variance. And I don't know if it's my age or what, but I always get confused by that. And I would also say that that little book that we got that was given to us by the city, there's a page in there that suggests that every motion always be in the affirmative. And I only say that in terms of if people are not interested in seconding it, I would ask that somebody second it, and then we could vote on it.
Well, if the motion does not have a second, the motion fails, and the variance will not be granted. I believe that is how the Robert's Rules of Order work. Mr. Edgerton, can you chime in?
I think we will need a vote. Regardless.
Okay.
Because the city ordinance prescribes that the board must either vote on approval or denial or adjourning for further evidence at a later date. It's very, very specified in what's allowed. So we will need some form of a vote.
Okay. Can I have another board member chime in on a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Godsey seconds. Any further discussion? Okay, then we'll go to the motion, vote on the motion that's on hand, and that is to approve the petitioner's request for a variance as is. Mr. Carroll, how do you vote?
I'm not persuaded that standard number 3 has been met, so I would vote no.
Ms. Godsey?
No.
Mr. Newman?
No.
Mr. Wazinski?
No.
And Mr. Bacta says no. The motion fails. The request for, the motion does fail, and the request for a variance has been denied. Mr. Atkinson, do you want to inform the petitioner what their next steps are?
We can do that offline, but
okay.
Those conversations.
Okay. We don't have anything further on the agenda. Thank you guys for attending. Callers, speakers, petitioners. We will, if there's no objections, we will adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, board.
Thank you, guys.